G'day, you mob. What's the goss? What is going on, right? What's the gossip? What is your news? Welcome to this episode of the Goss Guys, where I sit down with my old man, my dad, Ian Smissen, and we chat about what's been happening in Australian news and elsewhere in the world. Today is the second part of the episode that we recorded the other day, the first part being episode 5. Today we talk about women's sport in Australia as well as elsewhere in the world, women's cricket and AFL, Australian Football League. We talk about that in Australia and how that is a burgeoning sport, or couple of sports that are becoming more and more popular on TV and for women. You know, it's great to see them playing games like cricket and AFL, which were previously dominated by men in Australia. Furthermore, we talk about drug legalisation. Cannabis has recently become legal in Canberra, although federally it is still not legal, so that's interesting. We talk about that for quite a bit and our opinions on the legalisation of all drugs. We talk about how orcas were seen in Port Phillip Bay for the first time in my dad's life. Okay, orcas as in killer whales. They were seen, 6 of them, a pod of orcas in Port Phillip Bay. We talk about a wallaby that was found 6 kilometres out in the ocean, right? And how on earth that happened, right? What a swimmer. What a swimmer. And then lastly, we talk about how Indigenous paintings in Western Australia are being dated using wasp nests. It's a very, very cool scientific study that's come out dating these paintings using wasp nests as, I guess, the proxy, right? They're dating the wasp nests to work out the age of these ancient Indigenous paintings. Anyway, guys, without any further ado, let's get into this episode of The Goss and give that kookaburra a cheeky kick. Dad, welcome back.
Hey, Pete.
How's it going?
Hey, good. Yeah, since we last spoke.
That's it. So, it depends when this will be released, but it was ending up to be a really, really big episode, so I thought I'd better cut it in two.
Yeah.
So what else? You can think of anything else that's been going on in the news this week before we get into the stories that I've got?
Football started.
Yeah?
Yeah, Australian rules football started with the AFLW, the Women's League, started last night. So that's exciting because we go through this really intense period of sport over the early part of summer with tennis and cricket on, and then once the tennis finishes and the cricket starts to wind down, you end up with this period of nothing. And being a sports fanatic like I am.
How is that going? Because back in the day when you were my age or younger, it was obviously a very bloke-orientated sport. There was no significant female cricket or AFL footy.
Certainly when I was a kid, no girls or women played football.
Was that even recreationally for like small clubs or anything? There was just no...
And yeah, then probably when you were younger... when that sort of Auskick, that little sort of thing, there would have been a few girls.
Do you want to explain what Auskick is?
Yeah, Auskick was this. It's sort of like a national organisation where all the sort of local football clubs would have a one morning, on a weekend they'd have all the little kids come around and they would do basically some skill stuff, learn how to kick, learn how to handball, and then they'd have a game which, when you've got a bunch of 6 and 7 year olds running around, that's literally what it is. Everybody just runs around and chases the ball, but it's good fun. And so it's just a way of introducing little kids to the game. And I suppose when you were doing it, there might have been 2 or 3 girls and 200 boys.
And we all just did it together,
and everybody does it together.
Yeah.
Now it's probably not a 50-50 split, but I'd be very surprised if it wasn't sort of 1/3, 2/3 of having about a third of the participants being girls. There, around that time, though, there were also, around when you were playing, there would have also have been girls playing in junior competitions, where up until under 13, girls could play with boys. There was no girls' competition or boys' competition. It was just they all played together. And clearly the girls had to be better to play against and with boys, because they weren't playing against just other girls. But it worked. The challenge for that was, though, the girls who were really good at it, once they got to 13,
had nowhere to go.
And it was one of those ones where, to some extent, you understand, because clubs just simply weren't, you couldn't play girls in an under 15 competition because there were no change rooms for girls. And that's a minor thing, but that was just one of those things. And I use the example of probably the best Australian women's Australian footballer, Erin Phillips, who's won 2 of the best players in the country things with the AFLW, which is only in its 4th season. But she played in under 13. She was the best player in her competition, not just her club, as a 12-year-old, playing against boys, and was then told, you can't play anymore.
Yeah.
And her father was this is pre-AFL, but her father was a state-level footballer, played actually a national-level football, and that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to go and play football, but she couldn't.
Yeah.
So she switched over to basketball, played for Australia, won Commonwealth Games and got medals in the Olympics, and played in the WNBA in the United States for 10 or 15 years. And then when the AFLW, the women's AFL competition, our football competition, started, she came back and said, that's what I want to do. And so she'd spent her life basically playing her second favourite sport because she couldn't play this sport as a woman.
Why do you think it is that there seem to be so many women who can do so well across multiple sports compared to men? Do you think that's, like, it seems from my view that it's because there are smaller pools of women competing to play in those sports, so that the spread of talent isn't as wide, so the women that dominate in one sport tend to be able to dominate in a lot of others compared to the men. If you train really hard to be in the top % of men that can play AFL, you're not going to be able to have the body type to play basketball or to, play cricket probably, nor the time, right? Because training is literally...
I think there's an element of it too, but I would suspect that time is probably the one, because for decades, men's sport has been more professional in a literal sense, of that they are earning more money out of it. Yeah. Therefore, I think boys specialise in a sport earlier. There'd be very few boys now, as in junior footballers, for instance, who would still be playing high-level basketball or cricket or so on. They'll be up until about the age of 16, they possibly are, but often by the time you're 16, you've been recognised and rewarded of, well, we want you in the elite football competition.
This is where you're going.
You can't play cricket or basketball. You can do it recreationally, just mucking around, but you can't play state-level cricket, state-level basketball, state-level football.
Well, you're wasting your time, right? Because imagine all of those hours put into the one sport, focusing on that, and where you would be otherwise. And there's so much competition that you need to have given it everything, right?
And whereas for women, if you're... and I don't think there's an inherent difference between men and women from that point of view. If you're going to be a good footballer, you're going to be a good basketballer. You're probably going to be good at a whole lot of other sports. But for women, because of that lack of professionalism in them, they are...
Not in women, but in the areas, in
the sports themselves, that women have been able to play multiple sports for longer, and therefore can switch between them more easily.
Because I used to get so jealous of how easy it seemed a lot of the girls at jiu-jitsu had it, especially when competing in competitions, because I would show up and I would have 50 guys in my bracket. And so the chances of me getting to, winning that gold medal was close to zero. And a lot of girls would show up and they'd have 3 people. So they were guaranteed a medal already. But not even that, because a lot of them were still good, but they just didn't have the pool to pull from to have to compete and get through. But on top of that, they would be able to switch into other sports like judo and wrestling. And because they also had smaller portions of women...
The transferability of skills works.
Yeah, and they just do a few lessons and they're already, okay, well, we'll have you compete at the Commonwealth Games. Because Australia only has 10 women who are even thinking about doing it, you can already get to the Commonwealth Games. So you would see these women just be able to switch between sports and then shoot up and take over. So if you're a young girl thinking about doing sports, man, now's the time, because it's a saturated market for men, it seems. Yes. Well, it's so difficult to get to the top.
I joked with you for a while when you were at high school, when you won a state title in fencing.
Yeah.
And I was, proud of that. But you said, but but the other guy came second. You only had to, because you chose a small sport in Australia, but you also chose the least favoured weapon in it, and therefore there were very few people that you had to compete against.
This was sabre in fencing.
Sabre in fencing.
Yeah.
But I remember saying to you, if you want to get a scholarship to a United States university, forget academics, forget mainstream sports, but do fencing.
Yeah.
There'll be a handful of universities in America who would say, "Hey, we've got a national champion in sabre, we'll take him." And you get the full ride scholarship. So it's that women's sport thing is it's enviable from a male point of view.
Do you think it will catch up? Because I imagine
it will.
Eventually,
there's no difference in some sports. Swimming, tennis,
running,
golf,
any of those,
athletics. Those sports where they're even the highly professional ones like tennis and golf. There's no advantage to being a woman playing golf or tennis in comparison with the number of people you're competing with. There'll be the same number of young girls playing golf and tennis as there will be young boys.
But it's a burgeoning market, right?
That's right.
With those sports that are opening up, like AFL
and the contact sports, which traditionally girls have been less likely to play because they were considered not to be feminine and so on. And those contact sports have just really opened up.
Man, even MMA, there are some girls that I was training with who were really, really good. But they just kept going for a few years, and they're already in competitions like the UFC, stuff like that, and you just like the path that they had to take to get there was so much shorter. It still required dedication and effort, and also I think those competitions are dying to have more women compete in them, so they're
much more marketable. If you've got men and women playing a sport, they're more marketable at the individual level in the sense that you've got companies who are going to sponsor women in a sport more than they're going to sponsor men because it's new and it's different.
Wow.
And but the other thing is from a television rights point of view as well. If you can sell a sport to both men and women, you're more likely to get television rights bumping up. So,
how is women's cricket and women's footy going in terms of numbers of viewers and spectators? Is it catching up?
It's catching up. It's still behind. But it's
Do you think it will
catching up.
ever be on par with with the male sport?
It's going to be a difficult one because I think this is we'll use the AFL, the Australian football, as an example. If independently of whether you like watching men or women play sport, if you want to watch the purest version of the sport, it's probably watching women play it because they play football like men used to play it 20 years ago, or like young boys and young junior teams play it now. It hasn't got to that really professional, strategic level. The skills are very good. The fitness levels, particularly amongst the women now, is increasing really rapidly because you have to be that fit to compete to play the game. Whereas the men's game is, I love watching AFL football, but it's got to the point now where every year the strategies change and it's evolving and so on. Whereas, I watched the first game in the AFLW, the women's, last night, and I just looked and thought, I really enjoy watching this. However, it's not going to be huge. They're not going to be paying TV companies and things are not going to pay billions of dollars a year to have the rights to play the AFLW, whereas they will pay billions of dollars a year to have the AFL.
Well, that's one of those sad things that it kind of makes me think when I'm considering, do you give women equal pay to men? Your initial thought is that you want to say yes, but you have to think of what is equal. And if
do they earn it?
Well, but are the male teams bringing in a certain amount of money?
And that's what I mean about earning it.
Is that earning it? What is earning it? Is doing the time earning it? How do you work that out? And so that's what's hard, at least with some of these things that have come up in the news recently, where soccer players, women's soccer teams want equal money payment per year as the male ones, but if the male ones are getting all the spectators, whether that's fair or not fair or whatever, it's
where does the money come from?
Yeah.
If you've got, and look, I'll use the AFLW again. AFLW, in terms of number of spectators live at a game, is doing better than I thought it would. It's doing extremely well.
Yep.
And they get up to 20,000 people going to a game. Now, the NRL, the National Rugby League, another code of football for men, would be pleased about getting 20,000 people to a game. Not that the AFLW is getting 20,000 to every game. They'll have a few games where they only get a few thousand. But if they're getting a few thousand people, and I don't even know whether they're paying now. In the first season, they were free.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to, and we're in our fourth season now. The AFL, who runs both competitions, the men's and the women's competition, wanted to make this a community sport and wanted to encourage people to go. And it was free to attend. So they're not making money out of it from a gate attendance, but there will be TV companies paying for the rights to play it and so on. And so, but eventually, if you wanted to say, if I were a young woman wanting to play this sport and saying, they're only playing a very short season as well.
Yeah.
So, but even just a per game thing. So why am I not being paid the same amount to play a game of AFL football as a woman as a young man going into their first season to play as well? You've got to start to ask, well, where's the money going to come from?
Yeah.
The gate is going to be much smaller. The receipts from marketing, from television, from merchandising and all of those things are much smaller. So you don't have a right to expect, even though it's your performance is equal.
Yeah.
But this is not work in a sense of you're actually doing the same job.
Well, it'd be kind of like me demanding a certain wage for podcasting that, say, the top 1% of podcasters, if they're making millions of
Casey
dollars.
Neistat,
Yeah, and I'm saying, well, I'm doing the same number of episodes that he is, but if I can't generate the audience to pay for the content and to buy my stuff, then why do I necessarily deserve a certain amount of money per episode?
So it's a tough one. Looking at tennis is a good example, though, whereas there are as many people, if not more, who will watch women's tennis as watch men's tennis.
100%.
And therefore the women should be getting the same amount of money. So that's perfectly fine. But where it comes down to where the money is being generated based on popularity, popularity isn't logical. It doesn't make sense in terms of, the amount of effort you put in should be rewarded the same.
Well, and that's the hard thing, I guess, for the people to get their head around, that equality versus equity kind of thing. It's like, you're doing the same amount of time, but if it's not generating the same amount of money, then,
And that's not in any way denigrating the performance of
it just says you guys need to work out a way that generates more income, whether it's equal to men, if it's more than men, whatever, and then you get your fair share of that income that's generated, as opposed to you get the same as someone else in a different system
and look,
is getting paid.
Cricketers are a good example. Australian cricket team, and I don't know what the numbers are in a sense of how much they're earning, but there's a limited number of players in Australia who will get contracts with Cricket Australia. That is, they will get paid to just be contracted to be available to play for Australia.
Yeah. And
obviously only 12 of them can ever play at one time in any one game, and one of them is not going to even play. They're sitting on the sideline. But those men, I think, are earning somewhere in the order of $1 million a year just to be signed. Yeah. They will obviously earn more with endorsements and game fees and all those sort of things. I have no idea what the women's players are being paid, but I'd be very surprised if they were earning even close to a tenth of that.
Yeah,
purely on the basis of numbers. However, when you also look at it from the perspective of individual performers, I think we've got arguably 2 or 3 of the top 3 or 4 women players in the world in playing in cricket. One of whom I think is Australia's best sports person, Elise Perry. And hey, Elise, I know you're not going to watch this, but I'll call you out. Absolutely sensational cricketer. She plays she's a batter, she's a bowler, brilliant fielder, but she's also played soccer for Australia in a World Cup.
Yeah.
How many people have scored a goal in a World Cup finals match for any club, any team anywhere in the world, but is arguably the best player in another sport. So she's sensational, and she's marketable as well. But I guarantee you she's not earning a tenth of what your average male player is earning in Australia.
Yeah.
And that's purely on the basis of audience.
Yeah.
And it's unreasonable. Frankly, I would much rather go and watch her play cricket than most of the men play cricket.
Well, I guess you have to, get the word out there and try and see if the audience shifts. But it is like voting with your feet.
But it's getting there. if we look at what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years, I can now watch the AFLW game on television.
Yeah.
I can watch the women's cricket on television.
Yeah.
5 years ago, that was just not possible. And so we're now getting more public interest, and therefore media is more likely to cover them.
So how do you see it shifting in the future? Do you see it changing much, or do you think it'll just continue at a steady rate of what's going on at the moment, or do you think it's going to garner much, much, much more interest?
I think it will creep closer to the men's sports.
Yeah.
But some sports, that's different. Swimming is a good example of that. I think over the years, if you look at, certainly in my life of being a swimmer and following swimming, I think Australia has had far more famous women swimmers than men swimmers.
Yeah.
Ian Thorpe is clearly the most famous Australian male swimmer in your time.
And Grant Hackett, right?
And Grant Hackett, probably. But then once you get down to the third or the fourth, it would be difficult. But I could probably name 10 women who are swimming at the same time, who are winning gold medals and so on.
Yeah.
But that's in a sport that is extremely popular in Australia from a television watching point of view, but they don't get huge crowds. Most swimming pools don't have big stadiums to go and watch them.
Yeah.
So it's one of those weird ones where, every second year, whether we have an Olympic Games or a Commonwealth Games coming up and we have Australian trials and things, then the Australian trials for swimming will be on television.
Yeah.
Athletics? No. The National Australian Athletics Championships, they're never going to be on television.
Is it just because it's too boring, or what's the reason there?
Well, I think it takes a long time. Athletics championships will go over 3 or 4 days. It takes a long time to actually have anything happen. But there's just not an interest in it. But come the Olympics, everybody wants to watch it. So it's...
Yeah, exactly.
It's
It's a strange one with the Olympics and everyone being obsessed with the swimming, but then not giving a shit for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And, anytime there are national or whatever competitions on, no one's really watching it. It's not televised.
Go back 20 years. Who was the most famous person in Australia? Kathy Freeman.
Yeah.
An Australian female athlete.
Yeah.
So,
especially coming up to the 2000 Olympics in Sydney,
exactly.
right? Yeah. Moving on, I guess other stuff in the news was that Canberra has legalised cannabis.
It has, yay! About
I know.
Time.
So we
Catch up, states.
I think we have 50 grams of dry cannabis per person, 150 grams of wet cannabis, so undried, 4 plants per house. Legalisation conflicts, though, with the Commonwealth laws prohibiting possession of cannabis, so it's still prohibited to use. It's
But
still
you're
a
allowed to have
prohibited
it.
substance.
I know.
But you're allowed to have it, at least based on state or territory laws. So it is one of these confusing things. I think it's the same in the
bizarre.
US, where they've legalised it, where a lot of states
20-something
have.
states now.
And the states won't chase after you, but the country will. The federal, or in this case, Commonwealth laws still prohibit it, so they can come after you for
They
it.
can, but there's nobody to actually catch you.
Yeah.
Because the Australian Federal Police don't have the jurisdiction to go and bang you on doors to, decide whether you're smoking marijuana or not.
It's a very weird thing, isn't it?
It's a weird one. So
yeah, you're allowed to have it.
Yeah, I think
You're
the
allowed to
first-
grow it. You're just not allowed to have acquired it, or acquired it rather from
and you're not
someone.
allowed to use it.
Yeah, it's a very weird situation.
Although I think might have been reading yesterday that the first medicinal marijuana selling has just opened in Melbourne.
Yeah.
It's a place that you can get it under prescription.
Invest in that stuff. That's going to boom in the next few years here.
Look what's happened in some of the states in the United States.
Well, I
where
was looking at-
Colorado, after 12 months, where they put a tax on it to make money, and they had put a cap on that because they'd said we're going to earn whatever it was in tax out of that. They earned more than that, and they were paying tax back to their citizens on the basis that they were earning more money than they said they were going to.
That's it. It's crazy. So, like in the US, apparently it's 2/3 of cigarette sales, where cigarettes make up about $80 billion a year of sales in the US, and cannabis is now about $50 to $55 billion a year. So it's one of those things where I'm sure a lot of listeners won't be necessarily pro-drugs or using drugs themselves, but I would say that there's an argument to be had that at least if it's legalized, we can tax it, and you can take whatever that is, 10 or 20% off the top of $50 billion in the US. So it would obviously be a bit less here, but you can put that towards anything else.
And
education, hospitals, roads, schools, whatever.
You're taking crime off the streets.
Yeah.
Because if you're making it illegal, then people will be doing it illicitly.
Yeah.
They'll be selling it illicitly, and therefore they are more likely to be committing other crimes in order to be able to do it. So it's a bizarre one. Yeah, that whole war on crime, war on drugs thing, and not picking on Americans particularly, but
well, you should in this
we
case.
spend billions of dollars a year with the war on drugs, 95% of which is trying to prosecute people for smoking marijuana, not even selling it. And there has never been an established instance of somebody dying from smoking marijuana.
Yeah, well, especially in the case of marijuana. I remember watching a few docos on cannabis when I'll admit it to you guys, I've used it in the past recreationally. It's one of those things that's kind of hard to justify using today because I just have too much to do. You end up sort of vegging out, wanting to eat, and so it's very difficult. G'day, mate. That was the first half of this episode of The Goss. If you would like to continue watching or continue listening to this episode, make sure that you sign up for the premium podcast or academy memberships at aussieenglish.com.au, where you will get full access to these entire episodes of this series and much, much more. You can go check that out using the links below or just go to aussieenglish.com.au. Once again, thank you so much for joining me, mate, and I will see you next time. Peace.